Assalamualaikum students. I do hope people are well and fine. Today we have to talk about another important area of both discourse and pragmatics, that is politeness theory. Before going into detail about politeness theory, firstly let me tell you over here that politeness theory is one of the, we can say, that important element of the principle that we are dealing with, right? Actually, there are two basic principles in the area of conversational principle, right? Conversational principle is further divided into two main areas. One is cooperative principle and second is this theory that is called as politeness principle or politeness theory, right? So both politeness theory and cooperative principle, both are the part of what conversational principles. So let us discuss them in detail. So before going into detail about the thing that is the part of this theory, we have to talk about importance of politeness over here, the concept of politeness, right? So the concepts of politeness is important in interpreting why people choose to say things in a particular way in spoken or written discourse, and why they choose to flout a maxim or express an illocutionary act indirectly rather than directly. So politeness, if we talk about politeness in terms of pragmatics and discourse, then politeness is the actually the awareness of one's face, right? Now what is face? Face is actually the public self image of someone, right? As we know that we are the human beings, and we are social animals. We live in a community, in a society. Over there you'll see that every individual has got his or her own face, right? So awareness of one's face can be called as politeness, right? So this concept is very important, that why people choose to say things in a particular way or spoken discourse, and why they usually choose to flout a maxim. We have discussed this flouting of the maxim earlier. Now the second thing over that is written over here is that illocutionary act. This phenomena or this idea is not known to you people right now, so I'll explain it in our next topic, that is speech act theory, right? Or the kinds of speech acts. So I'm gonna explain it over here, so there is no need to focus it right now. So this is actually the importance of politeness. Now politeness, actually this phenomena, this concept is given by Brown and Levinson in 1987. They talked extensively about politeness. Their basic argument can be summarized as below. Now this is the basic theory, or we can say that basic concept that they have given. They say that when we enter into a social relationship, right, as we know that we are the social animals, so we live in social relationships as well. So we have to acknowledge, we have to show an awareness of the face to individuals, right? One another. Whenever we are in the social interaction, we usually have the awareness of our faces as well. So this is very much reflected in a way we interact with one another. So this is the term that is the face that actually helps us to maintain our social relationships, right? So whenever we interact with one another, we have this awareness of face of one another, right? So what is a face? Now face is actually, I have already told you that this is a public self image of someone, or we can say that respect of one has for herself or himself in a society. So that can be called as face. So now why politeness strategies matter, right? Politeness strategies are developed in order to save the hearer's face. We usually try to avoid embarrassing the hearer or making him or her feel uncomfortable, right? So this is one of the politeness strategies. So you will see that universally we usually respect each other's expectations regarding self-image. We take account to other feelings and avoid face threatening acts. So this is also called as FTAs, right? That is face threatening acts. This is a phenomena that is very important in politeness. We are going to discuss it in detail. Now what are face threatening acts? First, face threatening acts that infringe on the hearer's need to maintain his or her self esteem and to be respected. Example, when you ask a classmate to lend you her class notes, you would be infringing on her exclusive right to her notes, right? It happens sometimes. Usually your fellow actually they don't give you the notes, right? The reason is this, that this is his or her exclusive right to her notes, so you would be imposing on her to give you something that is hers, so that can be considered as face threatening acts, right? Thus face threatening acts or FTAs are often unavoidable. We are unable to avoid them. How? For example, speakers can redress FTA with negative politeness that respects the hearer's negative face, or they can redress the FTAs with positive politeness which respects the hearer's positive face. Now, if we look at this, we can say that these face threatening acts, it is again, these are, when we say these are unavoidable, so you'll see that now if we talk about face is further divided into two, we can say that, type: negative face and positive face. Now you'll see that the concept is very opposite over here in this phenomenon. Negative face is something else and positive face is something else, right? So we are going to discuss them first. So negative face, you'll see that negative face, the person's desire to be autonomous, self-governing, or we can say that independent. It happens, every individual, he or she wants to be autonomous. We mean independent. Then he or she wants to be free, then not imposed by the others and respected by others in terms of time, privacy and possession. So if a person is like this, then he or she has got the negative face in the society, right? As you know that society wants a person or individual to be the part of that society. So if it is accepted and liked by others and treated as member of their group, then the persons need to be positive face, right? Then his or her, we can say that, public self image is positive one. So this positive and negative is opposite one, right? If society is going to accept that person, if he or she is like the person that society wants, then his face is positive one. And if a person wants to be individual, wants to be free, wants to be respected by the terms of his or her time, privacy or possession, then his face is negative one, right? So in our interactions with one another, we are aware of our hearers' positive and negative faces. Absolutely. As you know that there are two participants in a particular conversation, in an interaction, and we all are well aware of, we can say that, the faces of one another. Like if we are talking to someone, then we know that the hearers positive and negative faces, and we try to redress our face threatening acts to protect those faces, right? So the whole conversation actually depends on this thing. So examples, here are some of the examples that we have to think about. First one is, come on, let's grab lunch next week. Second is, I'm wondering if you could join us for lunch next week. Third one is, could you please join us for the lunch next week? Fourth one is, I don't mean to impose, but I thought if possible we could have lunch together next week. So these are the four different statements. You'll see that these are different ways as well. So you'll see that how these are, we can say that, indicating less, we can say that, negative face or positive face, or we can say that how these are face threatening acts and so on, right? So example number one over here, author himself is going to explain it. Come on, let's grab lunch next week. It threatens the negative face because it imposes on the hearer's time, right? You're not focusing on the participants time, right? So the face is negative one in this utterance. In this utterance, we give importance to the positive face by showing the hearer that he or she is liked and is treated like a friend, right? So come on, let's grab the lunch next week. So this is example number one. Example number two, I am wondering if you could join us for lunch next week. This utterance shows more awareness of the negative face. How? For example, that the speaker respects the hearer's time and does not impose on him or her. However, there is more social distance than there is in example number one, which affects the positive face, right? So I am wondering if you could join. So wondering and could, you'll see that how these words matter. we are going to explain them later on. Example number 3, could you please join us for lunch next week? Invitations are face threatening acts. Do keep this thing in mind, because they impose on the time of the hearer. That is why they threaten the negative face. The way to invite someone varies according to many factors, including the social distance, age, degree of formality, status, and role. We have discussed earlier that these things are very important in any conversation or interaction. The social distance, age, degree of formality, status, and the role of the participants. Then this utterance is in the interrogative syntactic structure. If you look at the structure of this statement, could you please, right? So it gives structure to give a choice to the hearer, right? It's a question, and it's very much like a choice for the hearer to join or not, right? Could you please, and please itself is a marker that is actually indicating something. That is the part of politeness, right? Then example number 4, I don't mean to impose, but I thought if possible we could have lunch together next week. This utterance is more formal and more polite and shows awareness of the negative face, right? So again, the hearer is actually, as you know, that he or she is respectable in a particular conversation. So the face is again negative one. Then the politeness strategies, right? There are 4 politeness strategies used by people to maintain a balance in protecting the positive and negative faces of each other and acting appropriately in social interactions, right? First one is off record, that is also called as least direct or most polite. Then negative politeness, positive politeness, on record, baldly, most direct or least polite, sort of we can say that strategy. So the first one is politeness strategies. If we look at them, you will see that if we view the strategies on a continuous line, it would be look like this, right? You'll see that off record, negative politeness, positive politeness, on record, baldly, right? So you'll see that the less direct you are, the more polite you seem to be. Absolutely. Then conversely, the more blunt in stating your needs in interactions, the less polite you seem to be, right? Blunt women, that outspoken sort of candidate if you are. Then if you talk about your needs in interaction, and then the less polite you'll seem to be. That's the scene. So you'll see that off record is most polite, then comes very polite, then comes less polite, and then least polite, right? Off record is most polite, negative politeness is very polite, and positive politeness is again less polite, and on record baldly is least polite. So examples over here, you'll see that if you want to borrow your neighbor's vacuum cleaner, for example, this is how you may ask. If you ever find yourself in a situation where you need to borrow your neighbor's vacuum cleaner, you may use these strategies, but each is appropriate in its own context, right? So our vacuum cleaner just broke down, the floors are very dusty, right? So this is actually indicating off record strategy, right? If I say, could I please borrow your vacuum cleaner or just an hour, still a question to leave an option. So this is negative politeness. Then if I say, Susu or whatsoever is your friend, dear, I need to borrow the vacuum cleaner, you are in the area of positive politeness. Then on record baldly, get the vacuum cleaner, right? So you'll see that this is too much direct statement, last one, that's why it is called as on record baldly. So off record strategy, now let us explain it. Example on the off record strategy is that our vacuum cleaner is just broke down, the floors are very dusty. When would you use such a strategy? You are not that familiar with your neighbor, right? You are not familiar to your neighbor, that's why you use this off record strategy. Or you know that she is the type who does not like lending her appliances, right? It happens most of the time that you usually know your neighbors or the candidates who are actually with you and they don't like to lend the things. So in this context you can use it. In this context you'll see that no mention of an act to be required. You do not state that you want to borrow the vacuum cleaner explicitly or openly. The need is only hinted, not mentioned. By hitting, if you are being very respectful of your neighbor's autonomy, right, you are giving her the option of not taking the hint and pretending she did not understand you. Why is this strategy considered to be the most polite? Why is it the least threatening of all strategies to the hearer's negative phase? Because it respects the hearer's possession, because this is a thing that actually that hearers possess, right? And right to be autonomous and independent and not imposed on by others, right? So this is we can say that this is a strategy that is considered the most polite one. Then the negative politeness. Now example on the negative politeness strategy was, could I please borrow your vacuum cleaner for just an hour? So you still want to maintain. When would you use such a strategy? When you will maintain a distance from your neighbor, observing her right to her possession, that is her vacuum cleaner. So you express that you want to borrow it from her, but you do so in the form of a yes no question to give her the option. So you may be more familiar with your neighbor here, but you are still not that close. Now over here the factor is of closeness. Do keep this thing in mind. Then in this context you will see that the act is mentioned explicitly. Now you are openly asking for a thing, borrow your vacuum cleaner, right? Using a yes or no question to give an option to the hearer, acknowledging her right to her possession. Using could, which express the remote possibility of her allowing this to happen. Using please to be more polite. Using the possessive determiner, that is you, and using the prepositional time phrase for just an hour to minimize the imposition, right? So this is the context, and these are the different, we can say that, elements that you use in a particular sentence to make it the sentence that is related to the negative politeness. And again, to minimize imposition you usually use this, right? So the structures that you usually use in it are like the possessive determiners and the please and the remote possibility. For remote possibility you use could and such sort of, we can say that. Then you also use prepositional time phrase. So these indicate negative politeness. Now positive politeness. Example on the positive politeness strategy is, for example, Susan or dear, I need the vacuum cleaner right away. When would you use such a strategy? When there is less social distance between the speaker and the hearer, they are close to each other, or we can say that they can friends. In this context you see that the act is mentioned explicitly and directly. I need the vacuum cleaner. Linguistic features that show closeness, using a nickname, addressing the hearer like this. Now Susan is a word, and here the speaker is using Susu, right? Using an endearment term, right? Dear, right? Endearment term, if you are using such sort of term, that is called as like dear. Using the definite article the instead of your. Then the time expression right way. Given the relationship between the speaker and the hearer, how would the hearer feel if negative politeness was used instant? So the hearer would feel like a stranger because the speaker is infringing on her positive phase, and that is her right to be liked and part of a group or group of friends, right? So this is actually the example of positive politeness. Now on record barley, this is the dangerous one. Absolutely. Example on the on record Bardley strategies. Bring me the vacuum cleaner, right? When would you use such a strategy? It sounds very impolite, obviously, but there are contexts in which it is the only appropriate strategy, such as very close sister. For example, in this context the act is mentioned explicitly and bluntly, openly. Bring me the vacuum cleaner, using the imperative syntactic structure. So you'll see that the imperative structure is used over here, and you are using the direct directive bring me. Now this direct directive is not known to you because this is again the part of speech act. I'm going to explain it over here using the definite article the instead of your and no time specified. So here is the exercises. For example, notes that the extent of option giving influences the degree of politeness. The greater option you give to your hearer to say no, the more polite your utterance is. Example, I could borrow $30. Could I is more polite than could I borrow $30, and even more polite than lend me $30, right? So this all is based on this. So appropriateness and politeness strategy. The context of the utterances decide which of the four strategies is more appropriate, right? Now if we look at these strategies from the point of view of appropriateness or off record strategy, this strategy is appropriate when the speaker is not familiar with hearer. So the speaker gives the hearer the option of not taking the hint and pretending she or he did not understand by hitting the need. The speaker is being very respectful of your hearer's autonomy. That is a negative phase. There is a social distance between speaker and hearer, including differences in age, status, role, gender, etc. So imposition over here is great. Then appropriateness from the point of view of negative politeness. This strategy is appropriate when the speaker still wants to maintain distance from the hearer. The speaker may not be familiar with the hearer but is still not that close, right? Then appropriateness from the point of view of positive politeness. This strategy is appropriate when the speaker and the hearer are close friends and imposition is small one. Appropriateness on record boldly. So this strategy is appropriate when the speaker has authority over the hearer, either by being higher in status or has a more dominant role. The speaker is in hurry, or we can say that it is an emergency situation, or imposition is small. So FTA's face threatening acts. You'll see that acts that infringe on the hearer's need to maintain his or her self-esteem and to be respected. So these are actually face threatening acts that threaten either the negative or the positive face of the hearer. These are called as face threatening acts. Remember that negative face and positive face and face threatening acts, these are the three terms that we are using over here. The person desires to be autonomous, independent, free, not imposed by others, not directed by others, and respected by others in terms of time, privacy, possession. This is called as negative face. Then positive face, the person's need to be accepted and liked by others and treated as a member of their group, then it would be the positive face. Then face threatening acts are sometimes unavoidable, but speakers usually redress their FTAs through the various politeness strategies. So examples of face threatening acts to the negative face. For example, example number 1 is a demand for an action, a request to borrow from the hearer, take something from here, occupy the hearer's time. Example, invitations, etc. Then the personal questions. Then if you are asking these sort of things, then these are the examples of face threatening acts to the negative face. Now the examples of face threatening acts to the positive face: rejecting an invitation, disagreeing with the hearer, refusing a proposal, criticizing to the hearer. Then that is face threatening act to the positive face. Now here are the exercises. Actually this exercise is divided into 3 main sections. Speech act is again demanded over here, and we haven't discussed it right now, so we'll solve this exercise later on after completing our third topic, that is speech act, right? So if you will see that these are the answers to that questions as well. We are unable to understand it right now. So context and the choice of politeness strategies matter a lot. People choose the appropriate politeness strategy based on the context as follows. For example, there are 2 types of context that the author is talking about: situational context and the social context. In situational context, you'll see the size of imposition. The greater the imposition, the more polite or indirect the strategy would be. And setting of the interaction, the more formal the setting, the more polite the strategy would be. Then in social context, if social distance matters a lot. For example, the greater the social distance, the more polite or indirect the strategy would be. In distance increases or decreases according to these factors. First one is degree of familiarity, how well and how long you have known to each other, right? Then differences of status, like example boss or employee. Then the role of teacher, student, parent, child. Then age, education, gender, social class, these all matters, right? uh, these are actually based on these social context and social distance matters just because of the availability of these factors. Then the power relations, differences of status, age, role, gender, education, and social class give speakers power and authority as well. Power and authority can be expressed through the linguistic choices as a speaker makes. So in terms of politeness, those who possesses power can be more direct and blunt and outspoken, right? Who have got power. So the less polite towards the right of the continuum and vice versa. So the basic things over here is politeness, face threatening acts, then the types of faces, both we can say that face is both positive face and negative face. Then face threatening acts, politeness strategies. So these are the important terms that are related to this theory. This is called as politeness theory. I do hope this thing is now clear to you. Earlier I have shared 2 links by that man. If you haven't listened those, do listen them for your convenience, so that you can get the clear cut idea. So I think that much is enough for today. Okay students, thank you so much.